Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a new decade. First meeting in 2020. We'll begin our meeting as usual with our invocation, and that's going to be led by Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you'd like, please join me in the invocation. Lord, we thank you for bringing us all here safely tonight to do the people's business of Union County. It's with especially a heavy heart and consideration that we would give to the soldiers that may be deployed from Union and surrounding counties into harm's way. Please be with them, please keep them safe, and bring them home to their families. In your precious name I pray, amen. Amen. Please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on our agenda this evening is a public hearing, opportunity for hearing by claimant regarding request for refund of excise tax paid to the Register of Deeds office. Mr. Manager, you have any comments on that or want to lead us through that?
Mr. Chairman, this is a routine matter where an individual, the Hitchens Law Firm, requested by letter a refund in the amount of $944 in excise tax that it had paid when recording a general warranty deed. I believe that deed was recorded in the wrong county, and the Register of Deeds is asking that $944 be refunded.
Okay. Thank you, sir. We will open the public hearing. We have no one signed up to speak, so we will close the public hearing. Next item is our informal comments. We have no one signed up to speak, so we will dispense with that. Next item is our additions, deletions, and adoption of the agenda. Mr. Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could we take item number 13 and put it on the regular agenda from the consent?
Okay. Make that how do you bear with me? We'll make that, we'll put it under old business. We'll make that 19B. I have three items we need to add to the consent agenda. One is a revision to item 5, C&D landfill expansion project. And I'll read this information here quickly. It's a revised action requested to read, adopt capital project ordinance CPO number 247 and authorize county manager to approve task order 0014 with Civil and Environmental Consultants, Inc. for engineering services performed for the expansion of the Union County Construction Demolition Landfill, pending legal review in the amount of $248,300. The second item on consent is add proclamation for adoption that was received today, or sent to the board today, and the action request is to adopt that proclamation. And then a third item on consent, add attorney's general settlement and release with UBS AG. And that is to authorize the county to participate in the attorney's general settlement with UBS AG in consideration of a settlement payment of $57,343.57, and authorize the county manager to execute the election and release by participating counterparty document and any other documents necessary to effectuate the county's participation in the settlement. I also have an item in talking to the manager. I asked him if he would there's been quite a bit of information in the media lately relative to our actions with regard to our CIP on the water and wastewater master plan. And so I asked him if he would to update us maybe or clarify some of that information. So I'd like to add that as item 19 under old business, and then we'll just move that 19 item to 19A, and then the 13 will be 19B.
Motion to accept the agenda as amended.
Okay, we have a motion. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. That takes us to
Does that take care of the consent?
consent. I'm sorry. No, we need a motion to approve consent as amended.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Sorry. That takes us to old business. Mr. Manager.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to address these issues. Recently, I received an inquiry asking a couple of questions. First was, at what point during the past year and before December the 2nd, 2019, vote of the board to approve the 2020 and the 2021 wastewater capital improvement program, was staff given direction by the board to build a sewer plant on the Crooked Creek? The short answer is that staff has not been given any new direction from the board during the past 12 months concerning the construction of the Lower Crooked Creek wastewater treatment facility. The 2020 and 2021 wastewater capital improvement plans adopted by the board on December the 2nd, 2019, do not include any new funding for construction of a Lower Crooked Creek wastewater treatment facility. In addition, at the March 6, 2019 board retreat, discussion was held regarding the Lower Crooked Creek treatment plant service area. The board gave direction to the staff at that time to review the cost comparison between the option of partnering with Monroe for a waste service in the basin compared to building the Lower Crooked Creek plant. The comparison was first reviewed as an option in a presentation for the 2016 master plan updated by Black and Veatch. The cost at that time was deemed to be cost prohibitive and was rejected by the board when it adopted the 2016 wastewater master plan update. The Monroe option was reviewed as directed by the board. Staff, with the assistance of Black and Veatch, found that the cost was even more expensive than the 2016 estimate. This information was provided to the board in an update in the November Public Works retreat. The board's direction to continue with the Lower Crooked Creek project as provided in the 2016 wastewater master plan update did not change. The board will recall that the Public Works master plan guides the strategic development of all water and wastewater infrastructure in Union County. In 2016, the board adopted an update to the 2011 Public Works master plan. An updated wastewater strategy was presented to the board along with several options for wastewater treatment within the Rocky River Basin. The board deliberated and adopted the updated wastewater strategy that included a treatment facility located on the Lower Crooked Creek, which was deemed to be the least costly option with the longest projected useful life. Board approval and adoption of a master plan and successive updates provides the direction and authorization for staff to begin all due diligence necessary to develop project timelines, perform financial planning, engineer the project, and construct the infrastructure. To reiterate, staff was given direction by the board in the 2016 master plan update to build a sewer plant on the Lower Crooked Creek, and that direction has not changed. The planning horizon for the Lower Crooked Creek facility is approximately 9 years. Due diligence for this project began in 2016. Black and Veatch was engaged to begin stream modeling in the basin. On January the 3rd, 2017, the board unanimously approved an amended contract with Black & Veatch to complete the stream modeling process. The board approved the fiscal year 2017 Public Works Capital Improvement Program that included $1 million for engineering services associated with the Lower Crooked Creek project and $500,000 for acquisition of land on which to build a plant. In the fiscal year 2019 Public Works Capital Improvement Program, the board approved an additional $500,000 in funding for the acquisition of land for this project. A total of $150,000 in engineering services has been encumbered for this project to date. A site has not been selected and no land has been purchased. Site selection work is currently underway. Site selection and acquisition is necessary at this point in the project in order for the required environmental impact study to be completed as required by the North Carolina Division of Environmental Quality. Any land purchase contract for this project will be presented to this board for approval. It is projected that permitting, design, and engineering will take place in the 2022 to 2024 timeframe. Construction is projected to begin sometime in 2024 and conclude in 2026. In addition, I have been asked why staff has not presented a plan or budget to address the board's direction for water lines on main or secondary roads. Water line extensions have been a topic for considerable discussion between the board, staff, and consultants that were engaged to review the program and provide recommendations. There has been considerable work done on the topic of both short line extensions and new water transmission mains over the course of the past 12 months. With regard to the short line extensions, a plan and financing were developed to completely eliminate the backlog of Union County residents that have been waiting on short water line extensions for years. This 2-year increased funding for these projects from $600,000 to $5 million annually for both the 2020 and 2021 Capital Improvement Program. This year, we will add 8.3 miles of water lines that will serve 106 families. Next year, we will add 6.92 miles of water lines that will serve 52 families. All total, 15.23 miles of water lines serving 158 Union County families at a cost of $10 million will be completed. An entirely new process and new policy was developed for extending water lines to residents after the current backlog is eliminated. This process was approved and adopted by the board. Funding will be commensurate with the annual need and ability to fund. We anticipate and are planning for the current funding level of $5 million to continue into the immediate future for this project, or these projects. With regard to water transmission main extensions along main and secondary roads, funding for evaluating the feasibility for extending water lines in Union County was included in the fiscal year 2019 Public Works Capital Improvement Program as adopted by the Board of County Commissioners. In January 28, 2019, the board took up a contract item for discussion in open session concerning evaluating the feasibility of extending water lines in Union County. The scope of services included data acquisition, systems evaluation, development of a water line extension policy, the development of project phasing, and cost estimating. The contract was not approved, and the topic was deferred for discussion in the March 2019 planning retreat. In the March 2019 planning retreat, the board requested staff proceed with an evaluation of the short line extension program and study the feasibility of connecting existing residents to the water system. Barry Gullett with Catawba Consulting in conjunction with, Wooten Consulting were engaged to perform this work. That was projected to take 7 months to complete, with a completion date of sometime in October of 2019. The consultant recommendation for water mains along Union County roads was presented to the board in a special session on August the 19th. Conclusions were that water main construction program should be consistent with the Union County Water Master Plan. It was noted that Union County Public Works will be undertaking a new master plan process beginning November 2019 with the release of an RFQ for consulting services. I will add that this week those RFQ documents and proposals will be evaluated. The master planning process is a 12 to 16 month process. The master plan will be presented for adoption and approval by this board. With regard to the topic of water mains along Union County roads, the consultant noted that this is a long-term topic. These are primarily water transmission mains, not distribution mains. Very rough preliminary cost estimates for all identified water transmission mains is more than $200 million. The consultant noted that aggressive transmission main construction without a robust short main extension program to reach sustainable customer density is likely to lead to failure. Specific recommendations were develop a construction program for incremental expansion of the water transmission mains. Fund specific segments annually through the capital improvement program. Prioritize new transmission main construction on these criteria based on the hydraulic reinforcement to serve customers, improve the service and reliability and quality of the system, that it be consistent with the master plan, that it support economic development zones, that it expands the water service area, and that it coordinates with NCDOT or town-funded roadway improvements. The consultant stated that these recommendations would not come back to the board in the October final report, but would be direction to staff to proceed accordingly when developing future capital improvement programs and master planning. There was no specific direction provided to staff at that time. Staff presented the Water Capital Improvement Program plan to the board in the November 2019 planning retreat, and the plans for water transmission main construction to begin based on the above recommendations, even though that was not provided as direction. We heard the board's interest in that. The November 2019, planning water transmission main construction planning based on those recommendations would be funded in the 2023 capital improvement program and every year afterwards. It should be noted that engineering, the 2023 capital improvement program construction of those mains would start, that engineering and permitting activities for the 2023 construction would take place in the 2022, according to the master plan. And and it should be noted that this time frame syncs up very nicely with the new master plan, which should be completed and well underway by that time. And it will also be synced up nicely with the Yadkin water source becoming available in Union County. I spent considerable time reviewing past board actions over the last week and a half and all weekend long to make sure that I provided the board with the most accurate and up-to-date answer to these two items that is possible. And with that, Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. I think it's important that we, and I thank you for doing that. It's important that we, all as a board together, hear that information. So, Commissioner Rushing, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Manager, I've got some questions for you as you were going through your list. The first thing is, you said we had $10 million allocated for water extensions, short line extensions, correct?
5 million this year and 5 million next year for a total of 10.
How many millions of dollars have we got committed for a 3 million gallon sewage storage tank in Indian Trail or near Indian Trail Poplin Road pump station?
Are you talking about the Pompano Road pump
Right.
station?
The tank out there, the pump station.
Mr. Rushing, I don't have that number in front of me, but if my memory serves correct, it is approximately $12.9 million in this year's capital improvement program.
And for a total maybe of 15, because that's what I remember from the presentation.
I believe I remember seeing that number.
Okay. Can we treat 12 to 28 million gallons a day without building a new sewer plant in the Crooked Creek area? Do we have enough sewage capacity there today to treat that much sewage, that much water?
What was that number again?
There's 12 to 28 million gallons a day from the Norwood Yadkin plant. And do we have enough sewage capacity in that area today to treat that?
That plant is being designed to have an initial water production capacity of 12 million gallons. It will be ramped up in its production. If I'm not mistaken, it starts with something like, Mr. Yee, you'll have to help me out here, but it starts with something like, I'm going to say 5 million MGD on a water production and then ramps up over the course of several years. Your question is, do we have enough sewer treatment capacity to handle that amount of treatment in the Rocky River subbasin?
Correct.
No.
Okay. Do we have enough treatment capacity today with what we have on the books? Do we have enough treatment capacity today for sewage treatment in the Rocky River subbasin? Are we overcommitted?
Are we overcommitted? No.
Right. Can we meet the demands of the Atrium Hospital that's planned?
The Atrium Hospital Phase 1 has been permitted, and that sewage treatment allocation has been set aside for Phase 1. Since your line of questioning is going down the line of the Crooked Creek plant capacity, I will answer. Let me provide a little bit of more information on that. The current Crooked Creek plant has a treatment capacity of 1.9 MGD. It is currently producing about 64% of its capacity. It is currently permitted, it has currently there's 81% of its capacity has been permitted and allocated to projects that either are currently using it or will be using that over the next 2 to 3 years, it is projected. So in another 3 years, we should be at 81% production at the the current Crooked Creek facility. And as you are aware, once you reach 80% capacity in your plant, the North Carolina Division of Environmental Quality requires an organization to have a plan for how it is either going to expand that plant or expand its treatment capacity in the basin.
Okay. Can the water from the Yadkin project be used in the Catawba Basin?
No, sir.
Are you aware that staff told the Board of County Commissioners in 2018 that arsenic was pervasive in water throughout Union County?
Yes, sir, I've seen that presentation. That was also in the 2017 Public Works presentation that was made to the board by the Public Works Director.
And I remember it being said 2002 to 2006.
I think it's widely known that Union County has arsenic-laced wells and manganese also.
Right. And I remember telling people back then that we didn't have a source in the Rocky River area. We had looked for sources for years and didn't have any. Now that it seems as though a source may be present, there's no plan to correct that problem. So you would say we've been sufficiently forewarned that there's a issue with wells in existing homes in Union County, correct?
I think that's not a secret, Mr. Rushing. I think that's been widely known and widely reported to this board for quite some time.
Do you know that staff presented to us that it would cost approximately $300,000 to maybe million to put water lines throughout Union County on every road?
You're referring back to the 2017 presentation by the Public Works Director where there was a level 1, level 2, and level 3
Correct.
Estimate. Yes, I've seen that presentation, and I think those numbers are correct.
Okay. So we just were presented by staff at Public Works with a $900 million plan, including a sewer plant and a sewage holding tank in Indian Trail. No presentation whatsoever with a way to protect our citizens who have arsenic in the wells and know that they have arsenic in the wells, nor the businesses or anything else in those areas. Maybe it would have been prudent, especially since we've had many meetings about countywide water, to include that. It could have been 1.4 million, 1.3 billion, whatever the number was, but there's nothing there except for pushing that water. How many gallons of water a day do we have from Mecklenburg County that we're not currently using? Capacity. Do you remember that from that presentation staff gave us in November? I seem to recall the number is about 10 million. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't think it's quite that much from Mecklenburg County. We are currently, there's currently an interconnect that's being engineered over in the pressure zone at Weddington Marvin that's going to increase that capacity on a temporary basis during times of drought or emergency. I think it's 4.5 MGD. And there's an interconnect that is coming online in from Charlotte Water in the Stallings area, 1.8 MGD, and we're using that interconnect to take a water tank offline so it can be repainted and rehabbed. But
Okay.
Those interconnects are generally used for those purposes.
Mr. Yee is here. Can he come up and help with those answers?
I'm not sure that he's prepared to do that tonight, Mr. Rushing.
He gave us a nice presentation in November. You remember some of that, don't you, Mr. Yee?
Could I?
Okay, please do. Yeah, yes, please share with us how many millions of gallons you said that we were not using.
Good evening, Commissioners, County Manager, everyone else. The question, as I just heard it from you, is how much water are we getting from Mecklenburg, Charlotte Water that we're not using?
Right.
We have contracts with lots of different utilities, Charlotte Water being one of them. The manager is correct when he says that we're taking water right now so that we can take a pressure zone offline so that we can rehab the water tank. There isn't any water that we're not using from Charlotte Water, and so we can go back to the presentation and be happy to talk to you about it
Right.
at any point, but
There
right
were
now
some
we take about-
graphs.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at one right now. Right now in 2019, we get about if it was an emergency and we needed it, we would get about 3 MGD from Charlotte Water.
But there's a capacity of 10 from Catawba and Mecklenburg County, and another down there. I seem to remember 3 of those sources that had 10 million gallons per day. Do you believe that we can use water from the Rocky River subbasin in the Catawba Basin?
I agree with what the manager said. No.
But we cannot. We are forbidden by interbasin transfers, right?
I just want to interject here. The system is being engineered with an interconnect. Now, when you say
On a long-term
water
basis.
from the Rocky River Basin being used over in the Catawba Basin, when you say that, I am picturing a long-term usage. If we had an emergency, if for instance, and this is just a hypothetical, if the Yadkin plant comes online and is producing water, and we have a water emergency, a shortage, an outage, or whatever may happen in the Catawba Basin, then that Yadkin water can be used in the Catawba Basin on a temporary emergency basis, not on a long-term, permanent, allocated basis.
So for example, if we had a truck spill water in the Catawba River, or spill oil or something in the Catawba River, we could use that water short-term to facilitate having drinking water in that basin.
If the spill in the Catawba River, oil or whatever, should last longer than 30 days, yes.
Okay.
We have capacity, well, they built the reservoir out at.
Correct. How many,
Catawba.
a billion gallon?
Yeah, it would last us about 30 days.
Okay.
So, but if I can refer you back to the presentation we did on the water strategy back at the November retreat, on slide 16 of the water strategy presentation, what we said is, that our water strategy in 2025 would really be several parts. One is that we would continue investing in both the Catawba River side and the Yadkin River side on those 2 water sources. And there is, and I realize it's difficult without being able to show you the graphic, but when we showed you the county, there was the Catawba Basin, the Yadkin Basin, and in between, there's what we call the boundary layer that we would manage through the interbasin transfer certificate that we have for the Yadkin River. We have water contracts, and we would use the interconnects with the other utilities, Charlotte Water being one of them, in case of an emergency, just like the manager pointed out. And as we need to, and our long-term infrastructure plans take us out to where we are going back from one plant to the other as the county water demand increases to continue expanding those water supplies as we need it. And that we would continue building water transmission mains throughout the county to do exactly what we had talked about, which is providing water throughout the county. But as the manager said, it is a long-term endeavor to do that.
And Mr. Yu, you're familiar with Charlotte-Mecklenburg. Do they have a sewage plant, a sewer treatment plant in the Rocky River Basin that has capacity?
I don't know.
But
I don't know the answer to that. I'd be happy to research it and get you the answer.
Please do. Because could we not enter into a partnership with them to provide the $122 million sewer plant or sewer service? And if we do, then can we take the Rocky River Basin water over there? I don't know that we can. I think that would be a problem. Were you aware that arsenic was in well waters throughout Union County, and that we've been told by staff as late as 2017, and in a presentation where staff said that arsenic was pervasive in the groundwater in Union County?
I wasn't here in 2017. I honestly can't tell you what the staff told you at that point, but I'm happy to take your word for it and that of the county manager that presentation was
So
done.
when you were getting together this $900 million presentation that you gave us, nobody mentioned that there was arsenic in the water throughout Union County and it was a problem and has been for many years?
And I've seen maps where there's arsenic in the wells and
Right.
different tests, but we took a lot of things into account when we drafted the strategy.
I think your predecessor said a few times people could just get water treatments and hook onto their water at home and pay those bills, which can be quite
Okay, wait,
substantial.
Commissioner Rushing, this is a discussion about,
Oh, no, this is a
This
discussion
is
about
about
the question I sent to
specifics.
the manager. Right, it's pretty
Specifics.
specific what I asked.
that was not very specific, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Let's let everybody get in. Mr. Ray wants to make a comment here.
Well, there's been a lot said about what I do and what I think and what I said. And people that really know me know I'm a numbers person, and I respect the data. I was against the Yadkin project, but when you look at what it will do for Union County for the next 75 years, it will do the same thing for the Rocky River and Yadkin Basin, the eastern part of the county and the southern part of the county, that Lancaster has done for the west. And I'm not talking about the growth, but it will give us the water we need to do what we need to do, whether it be chicken houses, turkey houses, industrial along the expressway. And when I say numbers, people have been not looking at the numbers. They just throw stuff up against the wall, a lot of it with my name on it in the last 4 weeks, and a lot of it's sticking. But if you do the math on it, I talked with Assistant Manager Matthews today, there is 158 people that have signed up for these water taps. There's also 652 houses on that mileage of water lines that have wells. Now, they don't have to sign up, but anybody that's ever had to pull a well pump, and they don't break but one time, like 8 o'clock on Sunday night when it's 30 degrees. I tell you, because I have done it. That is almost 1,000 customers. When you do the math on how much an average house in Union County uses around 6,000 gallons a month, the math tells you that's 6 million gallons. That is 1/4 of of Yadkin production right there. All right, another thing, everybody has known we have arsenic in these wells around here. We have worked for years. I was the one that opened communication with Alligator Water, not Commissioner Rushing, but I included him in it. We negotiated through the manager, and it was just not a viable option. If it had been a viable option, I would have supported it, but it became a money issue. I did the math. Once we get Yadkin in place, at the last rate that Alligator offered us, we would be paying $20 million a year more for Alligator water than Yadkin water. That in itself is a game breaker right there. And that's it when we get to 25 million gallons. There has been so much stuff said that is wrong. This is not a boondoggle. And I'll tell you something else. You say, well, we approved a $900 million plan. When I came on the board, and you'll have to admit this, Commissioner Rushing, the master plan said $600,000 a year for short line extension. And my comment was, that's not acceptable. And they said, well, you're going to have to change the master plan. And this board did change the master plan, but you accomplish it by talking to other board members and working with them and pulling think tanks and staff and all that. We don't do it by belittling each other. And, you know, I just don't like for people to tell lies about me, because I've always said, if you're going to tell lies about me, I want to tell the truth about the person that's lying about me. And I just think whoever says this stuff, we're grown men. We need, this social media is of the devil. And we've got people saying, run water lines through the county, $450 to $500 million. And we still don't have water. If we didn't do the Yadkin, we wouldn't have water to put in it. Well, if we did that, rates would go through the roof. You just do the math on what we've done, and it makes the most sense. It's not even close. And what I'm saying about the 600,000, yeah, the long-range plan is for a lower Crooked Creek, but Manager Watson told you, we're at 64% capacity, but when you broach 80, water quality people say you better be planning, and when you broach 90, you better have a shovel in the ground. Is that not right, Manager Watson? So,
That's correct. And plus at 90, you can't permit anymore if you don't have a
Right.
plan.
now, and I went on some of those posts. The water is not going to the west. It's for the east. The east is who needs it. We have adequate water in the west. And when you say it's better to buy water from Charlotte Mecklenburg than to produce our own at Yadkin, do the math on it. We would be paying $2 a thousand more. $2 a thousand more equates to $20 million a year. In 15 years, we would pay for Yadkin by buying from Charlotte Mecklenburg. I realize now what they did. They had to get a backup plan. We had to have accessible points in the case of an emergency. And people said we can, instead of building Yadkin, we can use the reservoir at Lancaster. That reservoir is for emergencies. We can't use it to pump water to the other side. I tried to tell everybody, if you go from Stallings to Bakers and Bakers to South Carolina on Rocky River Road, everything east of that is the Yadkin Basin or the Rocky River Sub-Basin. And I mean, I've said it and people just keep saying, you're gonna send water to the west. People said, I've been behind this since 2014. People said I was chairman of the school board. People say I was bought out by somebody. I was born here, I will die here. I have a son buried here. And, when people question my loyalty to this county and talk about the big developers bought me off, everybody that knows me knows nobody owns Dennis Ray. And I appreciate the action of the board in approving this thing. Like I said, I was against it. I told them I was not for it. But when you do the math, greed took over with the other suppliers, or the instability, we did what we had to do. Commissioner Rush and you and Commissioner Helms and I went to Lancaster to the dedication of the reservoir. They told us, we have not had one cross word. This was the greatest thing ever happened to Lancaster County. It was the greatest thing that ever happened to Union County. It happened before I was even aware or even interested in politics. And this is the same thing that we're doing with Stanley County and Norwood. We have to deal with government entities. We can't deal with LLCs that can go bankrupt or sell or just shut down. I'll yield.
Mr. Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Rape, Vice Chairman Rape, you realize that, and you agree with that, we were told it would take $65 million to get 6 million gallons a day to the state line from Chesterfield County, and that last number that we were given per 1,000 gallons was $2.82 per 1,000 gallons?
I do, and that is $2 more per 1,000 gallons than we're producing water out of Lancaster right now. And when you do that, do the math on that, on just that 6 million gallons, that is $5 million a year. And we've got to pay for the line, and that's just to the state line. there is no users really down that. We'd have to bring a transmission line all the way up 601.
Well, are you familiar with the $400 million that was the figure given us to by Public Works to put water throughout the county on every road?
The people that you contacted that contacted me and gave me a piece of their mind, they got upset over,
I didn't contact, I put out what my feelings were. I did that in November. I didn't call people and say call any commissioner. I've not told anybody to call anybody. This is genuine disgust that we're raising 33% in the next year on utility rates for people now that live in the Catawba Basin that can't even utilize this water, to have to pay for a sewer plant to go in northern Union County to allow developers to build more up there. That's the problem that you have, is that if you use this water throughout the county, it would not cost the $122 million it's going to cost for the new sewer plant, which we were told by staff. So I think you're misunderstanding maybe some of these numbers.
You're
that giving.
misunderstanding. We can't pump Catawba water to the Yadkin Basin.
We've been doing it for many years. We
Yeah, but
can't-
then you turn
we
around
can't
and
pump
attack the
anymore.
Poplin septic tank for pumping it back.
As you have too, because the Poplin septic tank, the Poplin Road Pump Station, I think, is at capacity, which is part of the problem. They have to have more capacity and pump it back there later at night. I've been around this before. I've seen when the staff over-permitted and over-promised, and then they expect the Board of Commissioners to deliver. I almost thank God for the recession that we had, because that's the only thing that kept us from getting in more trouble. But we did have lawsuits. We had people go out of business and all those things. But I just ask you this, you know, I know, we know that arsenic is a problem. So when homeowners detect arsenic in their water, and they have to disclose that, Commissioner Helms, you're in real estate, you know this, you would have to disclose if you knew that you had arsenic in your water, correct, before you sold a home?
That's true.
So if you know that, and your home value drops to zero, what are we gonna charge those folks for the property taxes? And then all of us are gonna be affected again. So what I'm saying is that we put the cart before the horse. It's about a sewer plant. We've got 10 million gallons of water from other sources now, today, that we can tap into, but we're not looking at that. We're not looking at that we have water. What we don't have is sewer in the Indian Trail, Stallings area, and that's where this water's going, and I call it west. Anything west of Monroe is west to me. So I don't know if you lived in Stallings, I guess everything is east. But you don't call east the west when west is Indian Trail, Stallings, Hemi Bridge, and Lake Park, and those subdivisions are up in the end county. That is the west, period. And that's why people are angry, because the people in the west don't want to pay for more neighbors, and you're subsidizing those new neighborhoods that are going to be facilitated by that sewer plant.
Well, do you know when in 17 or 16, when y'all voted, when the board, before I got on it, when y'all voted unanimously to proceed with these plans, do you know who was the chairman at that time?
I was probably chairman because I'd just been told several times that we had arsenic in the water and that we needed a water source.
But this is about the Lower Crooked Creek.
The Lower Crooked Creek plan, Commissioner Helms, I know Commissioner Simpson have probably been on 2-on-1 meetings where I specifically told Mr. BOCC I'd never and would not support a sewer plant in that area. That I wanted to work with the city of Monroe to get sewer for them because we needed the water for the people who lived here already. We don't need it for people 75 years from now. Let them buy their water. Let them pay for their water plant. Don't make the residents that live here today pay for something 75 years in the future. It's not right. We have senior citizens that they won't be here 10 years in the future, but they're going to be paying 33% higher water and sewer rates. And it's wrong no matter how you look at it or no matter how you try to justify it. That is wrong. And this board should be ashamed for trying to make that a case. And I'm as pro-development a person in this room. There is no more pro-development person in this room than I am. And I'm for the builders and I'm for the people. I'm for growth. It's just fine. But you don't subsidize it with the people that live here today that are not going to benefit from this water. Matter of fact, we're hurting them because of this agreement with the Yadkin. We have to conserve water. From now on, we have to be on mandatory conservation. And that's been told to us by our staff, that that was part of the agreement, is not only are you not gonna, you're gonna have to pay for it, you're not even gonna benefit from it because you gotta be under mandatory water conservation for the agreements that we made, not for the droughts or not for the lack of water, for the agreements that we made to get this water. That's why I call it a boondoggle. I call it a boondoggle because people were told it's for the people in the east to finally get water. That's what they were sold on. That's what they believed. And now we're doing everything we can to pump it to the other side of the county. That's why it's so expensive. You can't pump it across 2 counties and it be any size, way, shape, or form reasonable in cost. What is it, $60 million just in pipelines to pump it that can't deliver water to anybody? So I'm sorry if y'all have hurt feelings about anything that I say on public, to the public, but it's in public meetings and they can watch it for themselves. And we cannot help that people don't have time to pay attention because they're busy paying water rates and tax rates that are astronomical.
But you are not taking the data and the facts and doing the math and putting it on paper and looking at it. Everything I've told you many times, you speak much better than me. But when you do the math, it's a no-brainer. Yadkin is the only solution.
Bringing water in
Okay.
for future growth is the no-brainer.
Okay. Commissioner Akins wants to comment.
Over the past few weeks, there's been much talk on social media about water and sewer rate increases and what was considered and what is being done. And I think, to quote Donald Trump, much of it is fake news. There was an allegation that staff isn't doing anything, or what they are doing are things that haven't been directed by the board. That just isn't accurate. In fact, I call it fake news. The board provided direction in the form of 2 votes on August 1st, 2016 for the wastewater plan and the water plan. Commissioner Rushing, who happened to be chairman at the time, Commissioner Helms, Commissioner Simpson, and former Commissioner Lance Simpson voted in support. I was absent from that meeting. The direction was very clear when that vote was taken on an interim solution that would be moved on with, and the long-term approach for the Lower Crooked Creek plant was clear. There should be no confusion about what direction staff was moving in. Additionally, in 2016 and multiple other times, staff has made it clear that there would have to be short-term improvements with a long-term approach being targeted for 6 to 8 years. In other words, the 24 to 26 timeframe. This approach was important based on cash flow and the desire to keep rate increases to a minimum. I believe this is what staff has done, and the recent decisions that were made were necessary for moving our system forward. Allow me to provide some historical perspective. For more than 10 years, water sewer rates were unchanged in Union County. Let's stop for a minute and be very clear. We are talking about water and sewer rates here, not the tax rate. Again, some of the fake news sources are telling folks that their tax rate is going up. That's simply not true. The rates that were increased will only be paid by those who currently use county water and sewer. So again, let me give you a bit of history. In 2011, staff recommended that water sewer rates should increase to 7% in 2012, an additional 7% in 2013, and an additional 7% in 2014. The Board of Commissioners instead increased it by 7% in 2013, and 3.5% in 2013, and 3.5% in 2014. In 2014, staff recommended that water sewer rates be increased by 8% in all 3 years of 15, 16, and 17. The Board of Commissioners approved 6.5% for each of those 3 years. In 2017, staff recommended 7% for the years 18, 19, and 20. The Board of Commissioners approved 6.5% for each of those years. I liken this to my financial planner telling me to save 18% annually for my retirement, and me only deciding to save 10%. Who do I get to put the blame on when my retirement is not fully funded? Nobody but myself. The fact that we didn't fully fund the recommendations, and I voted not to fully increase the rates at that time, only served to kick the can down the road. Well, now it's time to pay for the water plant. and we've run out of road to kick the can any further. That's why we have a 15.5 water percent increase these next 2 years. This isn't about paving the road, no pun intended, for future growth or to benefit some national developer. This is about providing water for every resident of Union County that's here today and has been here for many years. This is about continuing works that were started in 2011 and work that we've already spent approximately $27 million on. The rate increases primarily provide a clean, safe water solution to Union County for existing and future residents. Is the county growing now? Yes. Is it going to continue to grow? I think we can safely say it will. It's been said recently in social media there are other alternatives that would be less expensive and do more. Again, this simply isn't accurate. Let's call it fake news. All these alternatives that have been spouted on social media have been vetted. Before it was decided in 2011 to move forward with the Yadkin Water Project, the county looked at no less than 11 other options, including Anson County, groundwater, alligator water. Two important things to mention here is they weren't cheaper and they wouldn't be owned by the citizens, the ratepayers of this county. And you may think, well, who cares if you own the water plant? Well, the answer is simple. We all should. By owning the water source, we control the rates, the cost of future implementation, and direct where it goes. I believe that the people of Union County who own the water and sewer rates are better served in owning the commodity rather than simply leasing it or renting it. We must remember that water is just that, a commodity. It's very similar to oil. When the U.S. was dependent on foreign countries to provide that commodity, we paid more. When the U.S. started drilling and providing our own oil, prices went down. Water is no different. Do you want to own your own or be dependent on a neighboring county or a business to provide it? Owning a life-sustaining commodity like water is the right answer, in my opinion. I've noticed that every time an election is looming, there's talk of getting water to longtime residents of Union County. By the comments I've seen on social media, this has been an empty promise for decades. I'm proud to say that I never made that promise, but I'm delighted to be a part of a solution that will finally give us the resource to start making it a reality. It's curious to me that the commissioner who made the promises most recently is the one most adamantly opposed to doing so now. So here we are again at election time, and one of my colleagues is stating that no work is being done to provide water to existing residents of Union County. Yep, you guessed it, fake news. In March 2019, at a Public Works retreat with this board, staff moved forward in changing the short line water extension program. We engaged Wooten and Associates and Barry Gullett, and they provided the review of the short line program and shared opportunities for expanding water lines throughout the county's unserved areas. A deadline of October was established, and that deadline was met. There were several updates from the consultants and staff throughout the process, and we took action to eliminate the short line extension backlog over the next 3 years at $5 million a year. Beginning in 2022, there will be a new short line extension process that this board has approved, and budget decisions will be made on an annual basis based on the application process. Staff has indicated in the preliminary capital budget numbers that $5 million could be allocated going forward if needed. Additionally, beginning in 2023, staff has shown $5 million per year for water main extension. This is work that's being done now for the 2050 comprehensive plan and an anticipated updated water sewer master plan. We will finally have the water that we own and are now working on creating the plan to distribute it. All these components are directly related to providing water to existing residents. We are projecting that 30 miles of water pipe will be laid in Union County over the next 3 years. That is a significant accomplishment. To dispel another rumor, the statement that this board approved spending $900 million, again, fake news. The board approved spending $305 million on primarily the Yadkin Water Project. Had we approved $900 million, the rate increase would be far more than 31%. None of us like higher rates, but when the rates are associated with providing families safe drinking water, I could not and did not vote against it. Do I wish we had planned better 20 years ago? Yes. Did we? No. Unfortunately, if we want to have a long-term solution to water in this county, we have to pay for it. As Da Vinci said, in time and with water, everything changes, and the time is now. In closing, I'm reminded of what Mark Twain said, "Whiskey is for drinking, water is for fighting over." I realize that we do not always agree on issues that come before us as a board, However, what I would hope is that we would respect the decisions that are made and move forward in a concerted effort for the betterment of the county that we all claim to love.
Commissioner Helms.
Yes, a couple of things I'd like to address. Statement was made that we've made no attempt to provide water to the other areas of the county. And I respectfully disagree with that comment because there was a presentation by the previous utilities director that once the treatment plant was built up in the New Salem area, they're going to bring a 36-inch pipe all the way to Rocky River near 84. And they were going to bring that pipe without any opportunity to tap onto it. That would be a solid pipe that would come into the pump station to tie the two systems together. And we challenged that. Commissioner Rushing was a part of that challenge, and it was approved, this board approved the fact that when it crossed major thoroughfares, the ability to hook onto that would be built into the system. You've got to start somewhere. That is the start to running it out in that part of the county. We don't have those now. I'll have to, the short line, like I said, I called it the Coles method. And last year, being your chairman last year, worked with the manager, and I wished I could take credit for going from 600,000 to 5 million. It was staff that said, we can do more. What would 5 million work? That's a significant start to putting out that information, or that water source out into our community. And we need to commend our staff for stepping up to that problem. Mr. Watson, I think you're the one that brought it to me, and that's much appreciated. But to say that we haven't done nothing to put water out into the county is totally not correct. It's kind of hard to put water out there when there's not water coming into the area. I sit on the Catawba Water Board, and as Commissioner Rape said, it is a great partnership between Lancaster and Union County. And I volunteered this year to work on the Yadkin Board with Commissioner Simpson again, working with that. Because I looked, Manager Watson and myself and Vice Chairman Rape, we went down to meet with Alligator. And they got a nice story. But what wasn't told is they wanted $9 a thousand instead of the $2.80. They wanted $9 a thousand, and then they're going to use our pipe. I have a problem with Alligator's a good organization. They have great water. They are 501c3. My understanding, they could go bankrupt. We could end up with a $180 million pipeline in the ground that's empty. Secondly, Anson. They've been great to work with. Anson's particular situation is such that they're having trouble maintaining their system to the point where they can provide consistent water. Just within the last month, we had a 4-day shortage. And we utilized that emergency source of taking Catawba water down in that area to fill it in. So that's not a reliable source. The Yadkin was. Now, I was on this board when we signed the initial contract with Yadkin. It'll be a partnership. 75 years from now, we'll be the owner of that. We'll be calling the shots and saying how much the water's going to cost, what the infrastructure is going to do. It'll be Union County that's controlling that, not being dependent on any other county to make that decision. So that's a concern I have. Secondly, the talk about we're going to burden our people today for things that'll happen tomorrow. Well, I can tell you what, I've been in this county for 73 years. My grandfather fought for the rights and did work so that I would have a better life when we came along. My father did the same thing. All of our citizens want their children to have a better life than they did. We have to pay for that. We have to pay for the ability to move forward and have a better infrastructure so this county can grow. And I voted against the thing because I had a problem with the 15.5 cents. And the manager and I had conversations. I said, can you not do some of the ancillary projects and put that money toward the initial Yadkin? I am for the Yadkin project. It's critical to the future of Union County. And the future is only a couple years away. So I do have a lot of heartburn when it's called boondoggle, that 3 of the commissioners here voted for that project. Like they said, Commissioner Rushing was the chairman. So, you know, we've got to do right for what's right for the future. And there's not an alternative. The other 2 are alternatives. I don't know what the interest is. I mean, like I said, alligator water is great water. But have you seen nonprofits go bankrupt? They shut down. We can't afford that. And I do thank staff, and I agree with Commissioner Rushing. Some of the things we were told by previous management that's no longer here weren't necessarily correct. I can tell you that I've got complete faith in Mr. Lee and Brian and the manager and our assistant county manager staff. They are very transparent, and that's why I'm running for re-election. It's a great group to work for. I want to work and make some of these future changes that will make Union County better. Thank
Okay,
you, sir.
Commissioner Helms, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
The only commissioner that has not commented on this issue is myself. The intent of the item placed on the agenda was clarification from the manager, and he has done that for me. This board took action and has approved the funding of a water treatment facility known as the Yadkin project. We have not at this point taken action on a waste treatment facility. No funding has been approved for that actual construction of a waste treatment facility. So, in saying that, we will move on to item 19A, condemnation process overview. Mr. Chairman. Mr. Manager, I'm sorry. That's cool. I was waiting to see what I was going to say, right?
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, we have General Counsel Jason Kay with us this evening, who would like to give you a brief overview of the current condemnation process and provide a reminder to the board of what that entails. Mr. Kay.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you this evening. What I'm going to cover is likely to be a fairly brief overview of the easement acquisition process. This is not the acquisition of particular easements or even gathered around any particular projects. This is an independent look at how the process for easement acquisition works for a couple of reasons. One is to help refresh everybody's minds on the 2 policies we have in place currently for that, and to sort of till the soil for moving forward. So as a general matter, we have 2 policies that both point toward the same sets of goals. Those goals are to provide information and education in preparation for negotiation on every easement acquisition that we have. It is our goal in every single easement acquisition to do so with a voluntary transaction all the time. Negotiation throughout every phase, even when things might move into a position that is more formally legal in a court setting. The goal is still to negotiate and arrive at fair market value for whatever the property rights are that Union County is acquiring in order to move forward on a capital or an infrastructure project of some kind. The reason it's important to get acquisition done in a timely manner is because schedules are important. If you think about the life of a project, you start with planning, you move all the way through execution, and then one day you cut the ribbon and things are working. At the very beginning, the acquisition of the property rights needed to do that project is a necessary step that keeps everything else down the road moving along schedule. And if those things aren't completed in a timely fashion, it sets back all the other things. So timelines and schedules are important, but also, as you all know, time is money. Delays can lead to increases in price. Labor generally goes up, materials go up, the cost to borrow money goes up over time as you pay more interest. So keeping things on schedule is very important as well, not just from a public expectation of obtaining the infrastructure, but from keeping costs within the budgeted sphere that was put in place back when the project started. So completely independent from any particular project, these are the reasons why we're talking through easement acquisition this evening, and I'm gonna again refresh your minds on things that you're probably aware of, but there might have been some distance between when they were first explained to today. So there are three basic phases to how acquisition work goes, and they're very simple. You have a phase that occurs down in the department level where they're planning the route, the path, they're doing soil samples, they're doing all sorts of testing. Consultants are at work trying to find out the best way to provide that infrastructure. They do so, then you get to the whatever property rights might need to be acquired in order to make that happen. They will also, at the departmental level, begin to do appraisals and start the process of assessing the value of that property that they need to acquire in order to stay on time and on budget. Then you move into an agreement negotiation phase with the property owners that are impacted along those routes, and that usually includes an intensive amount of education. I'll get to that in a little bit, but lots of talking and going over and back over things so that people understand exactly the nature of the project as a whole, and secondly, the nature of the impact to their property as a property owner. Then the last phase of that can, for some of those acquisitions, lead into a legal phase that is sometimes known by the names of condemnation or in rem remedy. You'll hear lots of terms for these things. But it's the process by which the government, in order to complete the project, needs to be able to do so, and holdouts along the way can prevent the whole project. Just some of the public policy rationales over the decades for that particular remedy. But in Union County, we have two policies. I've learned this since I've started. Some of this is old ground for some of you, but we have a legacy policy that applies as sort of a grandfathered-in acquisition policy for things that were started before the new policy, the current policy, was put in place. And I've put this up on the board. It's a lot of words. I'm not going to read all of this, but I just want you to take a look at the differences between the two policies and how they've evolved. You'll see the legacy policy, it had 4 mailed notices, and there's a specific schedule on which those occur. The new policy goes to 3 of those mailed notices. The old policy had 2 public meetings where a lot of information and plans were put in front of public groups, invited community meetings for people to consider. That in the new policy, that has gone down to 1 public meeting, but in trade for that, there are a couple of phone calls and an in-person meeting as well that occurs. And then finally, an action is brought before you, the members of the board, to approve in terms of progressing through the legal condemnation process. And I want to just pause there for a moment to say something that's really important to understand. Litigation is not, and should not be, and is not here. I've talked quite a bit with our county attorney, who's done a really excellent job framing this up. Litigation is a way to continue negotiation, not an end to negotiation. Simply filing a condemnation action, that triggers a discussion, a more formal discussion about fair market value. People, as we all know, we've bought and sold houses. People value different properties differently depending on which side of the transaction you are. Well, if you just can't agree at some point, then you move into a court phase where there's evidence brought to bear on the fair market value, and you decide it that way. But all along, Parties are free to negotiate, discuss, talk. Sometimes property owners have a position that they're just against the property acquisition entirely. It's not a discussion about value. They just don't believe they want to give up those property rights, and I understand that. I'm sure we all do. That's another reason you can get into litigation besides the fair market value discrepancies that can occur. But I wanted to just note for here, the legacy policy, I believe, applies to 2 projects in the past. The current policy applies to the Yadkin project and other projects moving forward in which easement rights need to be acquired. Another important difference beside the public engagement piece and education that takes place is how property is valued. Under the old legacy policy that still applies in some instances, the way you would value an easement that was taken by policy was you take the property tax value, whatever existed on the books, and you would apply a formula that was basically taking a look at the area of the easement and the use for which you needed that easement. Was it temporary or permanent? And you would take the value of the property as a whole, apply it to the sliver of land that you needed, and decide whether you wanted a temporary or permanent easement over the top of that. The new policy simply looks at fair market value of what is taken on the day that it needs to be acquired through a piece of property. There's an appraisal that's done that's a specific easement appraisal, and it's a fair market value of exactly what you're looking at. It's not formula-based, it's appraisal-based. So let me walk you through a little bit of a typical timeline. The first thing that happens is the department, I should pause here to note, I'm going through the current policy moving forward. That's the one we're going to use into the future, so that's the one I'm detailing here. The first thing that happens is the department identifies the need for an easement or a property acquisition after it finishes project design. And that can take quite some time, but after that, the department initiates an acquisition process, and that can take as little as 60 up to 120 days, depending on what they're looking at. They obtain an appraisal, as I mentioned, and they start the process of engaging and educating property owners along the route and attempting to acquire all of that property interest without any condemnation, simply in a voluntary transaction. For example, if you're looking to put a pipe through somebody's ground, neither you nor I nor the government of Union County has the right to simply just walk onto somebody's property and put a pipe without paying for it. Well, this is the process by which they assess the value necessary to pay for that right to put a pipe on it and still leave certain overground rights accessible to the landowner. The second thing that happens is if that process over time doesn't yield any voluntary transaction fruit, it's then referred over to the county attorney, and that usually triggers a letter that's sent to the property owners letting them know that it has been transferred to the county attorney, and there's an additional 14 days of negotiation that can take place. Then after that 14 days, if the negotiations then at a more heightened level don't yield fruit for a transaction, the county attorney will ask for a specific acquisition action before the board, and that is informed by the department. It's informed by the real estate appraisals that have taken place up to that time, and then you all would make a decision at that time about going forward with a condemnation action. If that happens, if a decision to move forward happens, then a notice of condemnation is sent to all property owners and heirs. Sometimes that's very simple to determine on a property search. Sometimes, if it's a piece of property that's been abandoned for a long time and people haven't lived there, it may have passed through different corporate hands, different individual hands, different sets of wills. That can be quite a lengthy process where eventually you have to give notice to the state treasurer of North Carolina because they may have an interest because of all of these cheats that have gone on over the years. But that can be highly complex, is my point there. This also starts a 30-day filing clock ticking where you send this notice that you're going to file a condemnation action, and then 30 days has to run, and then on day 31 is when you can file a condemnation action. So these two things are different. Sending a notice of condemnation of the interests that are being looked at, what property, why, all of that's spelled out in the notice, 30 days plus one, and then you can file a condemnation action. All that time is time for continued negotiation and continued education of exactly what's involved and why. Then we move to the final, really pre-trial phase of condemnation action, which is filing in court a condemnation. When you're talking about this type of condemnation, it's generally a quick take. It is a quick take for water and sewer lines, which means that when you file that action, as of the date you file it, the government at that point owns title to that property, because there is no question about whether the government can obtain title to that property generally. I'll give you a couple of exceptions. But from there on, it's just a question of fair market value. You've got a property owner that's got a set of appraisals that say, I think it's worth this. The county has a set of appraisals that have been obtained independently that says, I think it's worth that, and you sort that out in court with an evidence. Once you file that condemnation action, there is 120 days that must lapse before the property owner has to file an answer. So there can be a period of 120 days with relative inaction on the surface of the litigation. Underneath the surface, of course, there can be lots of discussion about, well, maybe we can work back toward the middle and come to an agreement. Again, continued negotiation and education about the property transaction. You get to 120 days, and that answer either doesn't come and you get a default action, or you get a trial. Now, I skipped a step importantly because I wanted to talk about it right now. When you file that condemnation action, whatever it is that, in this case, Union County believes that that property easement is worth based on the appraisals it's got, it deposits that amount of money with the clerk of court and puts that out there already. Then you go through your trial or your default. If you get to default, that amount of money is divvied up amongst the owners. If you have a trial, then you determine whatever the correct amount is, and that sort of down payment, if you will, serves as a guarantee or security to the folks that are going through the litigation process to at least know that there's something there, depending on how the trial, of course, works out. It can turn out north or south of that number. It doesn't always have to be that number. It's not a floor or a ceiling. It's just an amount that's deposited with the court. So if you take all of that time and you add it up, from the moment you decide you want to acquire a particular easement and you start working toward that, that can take as few as 7.5 to 9 months between the beginning of the acquisition process, where property owners begin getting letters that their property is impacted, and any trial proceedings. That long is, with various elevations in the discussions and negotiations, that takes place to educate, negotiate, and come to an agreement. Again, the goal is voluntary transaction as much as we can have them. We want to pay fair market value for all of the property rights that we need to acquire. But that 7.5 to 9 months is kind of built into the schedule for how quickly we can acquire these things. If we start going outside that, then schedules start to slip. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you might have about the legal process, again, separate and independent of whatever projects might be driving that at the time. If there are none, I will delightfully step aside.
Thank you very much. That takes us to item 19B, which is item 13. Commissioner Rushing.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. On this item, we had an individual asking for the city of Monroe to be able to service her home, which is in the county. Oddly enough, I had a call over the weekend from another, actually retired county employee who said that he had tried to get Monroe Water, but was told that they had doubled their, if you didn't live in the city, you doubled your capacity fee and you doubled your tap fee. I've since learned that that's not the case, that if you live in the county and you would like Monroe City Water, then you just would pay what the regular rate, the tap rate is. So I would encourage more people, and I would think that maybe if we could somehow on social media get that word out, that if the county doesn't intend to serve you, then there is another option, and that's the city of Monroe. You could go and ask and go through the process like this lady has, which I'm in full support of her getting this water. But they no longer double charge county residents for the water and the sewer as they used to. And again, that was confirmed today by the city of Monroe. And with that, I'd make a motion that we approve this request.
Okay, we have a motion. Any questions or discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just for clarification, there is a process that residents should go through when seeking to be serviced. If they are not in the city of Monroe, the first thing they need to do is contact Union County Public Works and find out whether or not service is available to them or what it may take to have service provided to them. Union County Public Works will then inform them whether or not there is service available or service is planned to be available and under what time frame. If service is not available and we don't plan for service to be available, then we will give notice to the city of Monroe, and the resident may go and discuss the matter with the city of Monroe. If Monroe has service available in the immediate area and they are able to and willing to provide that service, then they will send me a letter stating that this person has approached them. And through the interlocal agreement we have with Monroe, that request comes back to this board for this board to grant formal approval of that. And that's what this letter is. This is what this action is now. This person we're seeking the board's approval for that person to be serviced by the city of Monroe. And then when that approval is granted, then the city of Monroe may provide that service to that resident. So that's the process, and that's governed by the interlocal agreement that Monroe has with Union County.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Anything further? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, none. Thank you. All righty, item 20 is some appointments to our boards and committees. First one is the planning board. There's one vacancy for an unexpired term of a regular member. Mr. Helms.
Yes, I'd like to nominate Jonathan Thomas. We have had the opportunity to hear from Jonathan. He's extremely well prepared in his studies. I think he will make an outstanding member of our planning board.
Okay. Commissioner Rush.
And I would also like to, I'm sorry, one vacancy.
Yes.
I'm fine.
Okay, no others? All in favor? Say aye. Aye. Okay, next item is Board of Adjustment. We have a vacancy for one regular member. Commissioner Rape, sorry.
I would like to nominate William McGuirt. He's a retired attorney from Sheriff's Department, and I've known Bill since elementary school. He is a lawyer and will bring great knowledge and work to the Board of Adjustments.
Any further? All in favor of Mr. McGuirt, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. And,
Mr. Chairman, I have been contacted by a couple of individuals who had intended to apply and have not yet applied. One of them thought they did, but apparently we have not received their applications. I would ask that the Economic Development Board not be filled tonight.
okay. Since you raised that issue, is that, all in favor of that suggestion, say aye. Aye. Okay. Unanimous on that. I think we missed our alternate members on our Board of Adjustment, and we'll do that right now. If I understand it correctly, does that say vacancy for one alternate member and for one more that on the term is unexpired, or soon to expire?
Right.
So two, actually. Okay. Okay. So what we're looking for is any suggestions on that or nominations? Alternate members.
Mr. Chairman, just for
Yes.
clarification,
Yes.
the first one, the term has already expired, so this would be a new term.
Right.
And the second one, the term ends on April the 19th of 2020. So if the board wanted to approve to fill the unexpired term and then do a full term.
So it could be one person to do both of those?
It
Is
could
what
be-
you're saying?
No, it could be one person to do to fill the unexpired term.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right,
Yeah,
and then.
So two full terms,
right,
two people, two
because
full
there's
terms,
only a
yeah,
couple of
okay.
months left.
Commissioner,
Motion to approve Christopher Dion Edwards as an alternate for the second term that ends on 4/19/2020.
okay. You have a name for the alternate member with the term ending April 19, 2020. Any others? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. That leaves one alternate member, right?
So,
Can I ask for clarification? Can I,
Certainly.
on that alternate that was approved, is that for a full term?
Is that a part of your suggestion, Mr. Rushing, or no? Was it just for the,
Okay, we're looking for two.
no, you.
There are
What
two
we discussed
slots.
is, you could have that individual also fill another full term,
Maybe-
along with the unexpired term.
Maybe Brett Lawrence, he's applied or indicated interest on the planning board, but we got that filled, and maybe Lawrence Brett for
Okay.
the other position,
Okay,
for the, I guess, the full term.
for the full term for an alternate member.
Right. Full term.
Everybody clear on that?
Which one, we voted on the alternate member before, right? And then-
We have voted, Mr. Christopher Dion Edwards for the term ending April 19, 2020, so far. That's all we've done. And we have a nomination for Brett Lawrence for a full term. All in favor, Mr. Lawrence? Say aye. Aye.
So,
No, I didn't answer your question.
so
We'll
just so the board is clear, on April the 18th, you will have to make a decision on reappointing Mr. Dion. The board understands that is the decision
Yeah.
that you'll have to make. Okay, very good.
All right. And we took care of the Economic Development Board, Juvenile Crime Prevention Council.
Motion to reappoint Lindsey Horn, Emily Westover, Christopher Westover.
Okay, we have a motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. And I believe that takes us to item 21, refugee resettlement.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Board, we have guests with us tonight who are here to talk about an executive order that was passed on September, or signed into law September 26th of 2019 regarding enhancing state and local involvement in refugee resettlement in the United States. Sandra Buck with Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Charlotte is here, and Marcia Hirsch from Carolina Refugee Resettlement Agency to provide a presentation for the board.
Thank you very much.
Welcome and thank you for your patience.
I've learned a lot this evening, actually, listening to all of this, and we appreciate y'all taking the time to have us come and speak this evening. Yep. Thank you.
Do you have your presentation already on?
I think it's up.
Let's do.
Great, thanks so much. So, again, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this evening. My name is Marcia Hirsch, and I'm the Executive Director at Carolina Refugee Resettlement Agency, and I'm here with my counterpart, Sandy Buck, who is a Regional Director for Catholic Charities in Charlotte. Refugee resettlement has been going on in this part of North Carolina since the early 1980s with the Refugee Act of 1980. Catholic Charities has been working through all of those years, and we can estimate that approximately 15,000 refugees have been resettled by Catholic Charities since that time. Carolina Refugee has been in operation since the mid-1990s, and we can estimate that over 10,000 refugees have been resettled by our offices. So there have been tens of thousands of people over the decades who have made Mecklenburg County and Union County their new homes. And so what has happened at this point is that the executive branch has made the addition of a requirement for an opt-in letter from state governors as well as from counties where refugees may be resettled in the coming federal fiscal year. So I wanted to take a few moments to just explain the refugee resettlement process to you as it has existed for all of these years, and then we'll go on to make a clarification regarding what is needed for the executive order requirement. So the first thing to understand here is that obviously immigration issues are very complex, and the United States government has many different categories for people to be able to enter the country legally. So in the news, we hear asylum, we hear DACA, we hear immigrants, we hear temporary protective status, and all of these are categories with their own eligibility requirements and their own benefits if granted to people that are entering the country. I want to speak specifically tonight about the status of a refugee. So a refugee is defined by the United Nations and the Geneva Conventions after World War II as a person who's been forced to flee their country from a well-founded fear of persecution under the categories that are listed in the presentation. So being a refugee isn't a choice that people are making. They have been forced out of their homes and are going to wind up having to flee to a second country or a second location and register with the United Nations. There are a few other categories besides the United Nations. We also have groups of people that may qualify for refugee status under the Special Immigrant Visa Program. These are people that supported the U.S. troops and other nonprofits in Iraq and Afghanistan during those wars, and for the fact of their support, oftentimes as interpreters, their lives have been put in danger and in risk. So the U.S. government has a program where they can apply inside of Baghdad or inside of Kabul to be considered for refugee status to enter the United States directly from those countries. There's also a program that the State Department has called an Affidavit of Relationship. There's multiple programs under this idea. In the case of our two offices in recent years, we have the Lautenberg program, which was established in the mid-1990s after the collapse of the former Soviet Union. And this is a program that is confirmed by Congress on an annual basis and allows family members that are already here in the United States to make an application for their family members in the former Soviet Union. And additionally, at one point, Iran was also added to that list. So our local offices here are taking applications for consideration and processing from those countries. There had also been for a number of years a Central American Minors Program, which was an attempt to alleviate the circumstance of so many young children coming to the southern border. At the moment, that program is closed, but that was a significant part of our office's activities for quite a number of years. So there's a number of mechanisms that people may enter the United States with refugee status. But the one that we're focused on the most often in our offices in Charlotte are with people who come through the United Nations. So again, they're required to have fled from their home country and be located in a second place. After their registration, they may be waiting for years, in many cases decades, before there might ever be an opportunity for third country resettlement. But if that should transpire, that the U.S. government determines that they are going to begin looking at a particular group's files and making a screening and vetting process for them, then the UN sends these files, their individual cases, to the U.S. State Department and the Department of Homeland Security for a multi-step vetting procedure of medical security and background checks that will also include multiple in-person interviews. If people pass through all of those gates, then we are working with our federal partners in the State Department, the Bureau of Population, Refugees and Migration, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of Health and Human Services. So the next couple of slides explain the roles of each of these federal partners in the resettlement process. So the State Department has a relationship with 9 national organizations. Many of these you may be familiar with. And once people have passed through that vetting procedure, then their names are given to these 9 agencies. Each of those 9 have their own network of affiliate offices around the country. Carolina Refugee is affiliated with number 4, HIAS, and Catholic Charities is affiliated with number 7, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. So it is from those agencies that we receive the names and cases for families and individuals that may wind up coming to live in the Charlotte area. So, as you all understand already, these are the 2 agencies that are here in this part of the state. The Triad and the Triangle also have resettlement offices. I would say that as it goes, North Carolina has been in the top 10 of refugee receiving states for the last many years. So once someone has gone through those vetting procedures and then have been subsequently assigned to one of our offices, then we begin our activities. Everything else I've described to you so far are things that go on up above our heads in an overseas processing. But once we know that a particular family is coming, then we are going to begin our State Department procedures. We are following very specific guidelines and timelines and deadlines for the services that are part of the initial reception and placement. So we're going to be acquiring housing. We'll be picking folks up from the airport. We'll be required to have appropriate language and staff available to communicate with them. They will be going to the Social Security office for their cards. They will be visiting the health department. They'll have ongoing cultural orientations. If there are children in the case, they will be enrolled into the public school system. Adults will be enrolled into ESL programs. And then most importantly, they will be meeting with our employment managers. There are dozens of employers that work with us throughout this area. And the 90 days is important as regard to employment because while people may get temporary food stamps or they may have temporary Medicaid to see a doctor when they initially arrive, at the 90-day mark, they will be required to be financially responsible for themselves. And so both of our agencies have very high success rates on getting a family member employed into the local economy. And with that, the resettlement period is over. So it's very quick. However, 90 days to be up and running is a little tight. So with that, in the Department of Health and Human Services at the federal level is the Office of Refugee Resettlement, or ORR. ORR has a variety of responsibilities, so you may have heard about this organization in the news for many different reasons. But from the standpoint of our office's funding with them, We have multiple programs, either administered through our national agencies of HIAS or USCCB, and then there is also a state refugee coordinator's office in Raleigh. And so with that, we can support refugees for up to a 5-year period, depending on their needs, with intensive medical case management, ongoing employment services, and job upgrades. Catholic Charities has an after-school program. We have citizenship preparation classes, and also cultural adjustment and orientations like driving courses, financial literacy, and health care insurance information. As I mentioned, the Medicaid will expire, and then refugees would be just like the rest of us and have to find appropriate health insurance. The immigration services are important because refugee status is legal entry into the United States, but it is a temporary status. At the 1-year mark, all refugees are required to apply for their lawful permanent residency or green cards. And so we both have accreditation with the Department of Justice so that we can provide immigration legal services in our office for those specific needs. So in the current requirements of refugee resettlement, we are meeting with DSS, the Social Security Administration, the school system, the health department, the police department in quarterly consultations. We've been doing that since 2013. And so refugee resettlement agencies are already working very closely with state and local officials in the resettlement process and the reception requirements when people first arrive. So the list of attendees that we have at these quarterly meetings is there for your review. And I think in recent times we've also had a member of the health department for Union County has begun to attend our meetings. These are public meetings, and so anyone that's interested in the current state of refugee resettlement here locally can attend those meetings and understand what kind of activities are going on. So on September 26th of this year, President Trump signed an executive order, and this is a new procedure of written consent that is being required by the governor of each state in order for refugees to be allowed to come to that state, and then secondarily, any county where initial reception and placement may take place, then we want to make sure that we have the county's consent as well. So that is the reason that we are here this evening. Governor Cooper has already signed his consent for North Carolina. Just prior to the Christmas holidays, Mecklenburg County has signed its consent. There is a small amount of clients whose families live here in Union County, and so if there should be an arrival of those family members to join them at any point in the future, we wanted to make sure that Union County was part of that consent process so that people can join their families directly here. If there is no letter of consent on file with the State Department, then refugees would not be allowed to initially resettle during that first 90 days. Of course, anyone can move anywhere in the country they want to in the future, but then that circumstance of the services that we discussed would be extremely limited if they weren't placed directly into their homes upon arrival. The goal of the refugee resettlement program has always been self-sufficiency and social adjustment. I mentioned about people applying for lawful permanent residency after 1 year of living in the country, and then refugees are then eligible to naturalize and become U.S. citizens at the 5-year mark. And so with that, we look for a public-private partnership of support. We have volunteers, local nonprofits, faith-based organizations across the spectrum of religions that are supporting us here locally, and we appreciate all that activity and participation on behalf of refugee resettlement. And so With that citizenship, then refugees eventually do become our fellow countrymen and become part of America's future. So if we can answer any other questions, we're happy to do so, and we appreciate your time this evening to understand the resettlement process here in Union County.
Mr. Russell?
How long does it take before they get temporary citizenship? They get that right away? Or not
Lawful
temporary
permanent
citizenship,
residency.
Temporary residency where
It's
they,
lawful permanent residency. Lawful permanency residency is indefinite,
no, but I
but
mean, when does it start?
they make the application with the Department of Homeland Security at 1 year of arrival.
Okay. When they get here, though, they're considered,
They've legally entered the country through
Right.
the U.S. State Department. They have a travel document that the State Department issues to them so that they can pass through their port of entry on their way to Charlotte.
one problem that I have with this is that, and this is from personal experience, we teach volunteer hunter education courses, and if I hadn't had an FFL license, I probably would have never picked up on it. But we had 4 Syrian refugees come to a class, and after the class, they said that they had been here for 1 week. We're required or we're asked to report suspicious things like that to the FBI and to other organizations, and that's what I did the next day. The FBI didn't understand why I was asking that. The lady at the FBI I talked to, the folks at North Carolina Wildlife didn't really understand why I was asking that at first. But with that hunting license that they can obtain with the class, they can purchase rifles and shotguns. So when I asked how long they had been here or what they planned to hunt, they didn't know what they planned to hunt, and they just needed a hunting license. So that does concern me a lot, maybe that our vetting process maybe isn't exactly what it should be. That's a loophole that rather than finding out and some tragedy occur and we start losing our rights as gun owners, I would rather err on the side of caution until the government gets something taken care of where that's not the case, where that's not going to be a problem. For example, if somebody came into work for a week from Japan, they don't own a firearm, but they would be they would be legally here, and they could legally take a hunting class, get a hunting license, and purchase a rifle or shotgun to go out shooting with the other people in the company. So that's something that needs to be hammered out. And like I said, that vetting process, why those guys came in after just a week being here to get something that would allow them to purchase firearms is very concerning to me.
Yeah.
And that's just the one that was caught. So there could be others, and it's a concern. But thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
a couple of things. So one is, we would like to have some direction from the board on how to proceed with this request that we've had to either sign a letter of consent or not. Additionally, just for clarification for the board, we receive approximately 10 to 12 refugees annually that we see through Human Services, less than 20 on average. So I just want you to understand the magnitude of the request that's been received.
Okay.
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Michelle? So we receive 12 to 20 annually,
10 to 12.
10 to 12 annually,
Mhm. Less than 20.
and I had 4 in a class. I make the motion that we do not sign a letter of consent.
Can I just address
We-
that?
We have a motion, now discussion, and you may respond to that.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
So Catholic Charities has been putting refugees into Union County for quite some time. In the last 5 years, we've placed 78 individuals into Union County, and they are all part of the Lautenberg program. They're either Ukrainian, Russian, or Moldovan. Their families already live here and petitioned to bring them over. So the Syrian refugees that you're talking about were not probably resettled into Union County. But like Marcia stated before, once refugees arrive anywhere in the country, they're free
They
to
can go
move
anywhere.
about wherever they want to. So by asking for consent in Union County, what you'd be saying is that the families that live here, that are bringing their families over, parents, children, brothers, sisters, to be reunited, we want them to be reunited with their family versus coming into Mecklenburg County to get their services and then having to move at a later date.
So, do I understand then that in order for them to come to Union County, they have to have family here? Or they can just arbitrarily decide Union County is where I want to go?
For our circumstances, all the refugees we have resettled into Union County have been family reunification cases. Their
Right.
families applied to bring them over.
I understand.
We are located in Mecklenburg County, so we have no reason to put families in Union County unless they already have family members here, because it's more convenient for us to serve them in Charlotte. But if they have family members here, they want to live with their family, that's where they go.
But if we give this consent, then what's to stop you from sending those individuals down here regardless of whether they have family or not?
Because logistically, it doesn't make any sense for us to, we're located in Charlotte, Marcia's located in Charlotte. It's much easier for our case managers to work with clients living in Charlotte than it is to do home visits and all of the other work that we do those first 90 days from Charlotte coming down to Indian Trail or Monroe or Matthews.
Commissioner Helms.
Do we have the structure they're describing here in Union County? Do we have representatives such as these two young ladies?
They're in Charlotte, as they both pointed out, but our social services and folks at the health department currently work with refugees that come through their programs that are settled in Union County. Yes, we already do that.
So you have a counterpart down here in Union County that works for the health services?
No, that's not what I'm saying. Their operations are in Charlotte, but they have to work through the health department and through social services for the items that they describe that are needed in the first 90 days. So we have been doing that since the early 80s, I'm assuming, based on all the information that I have. This executive order is just currently going into effect. So we have been operating, following this process without any consent. There was none required. When refugees arrive, our staff is notified and they are consulted in how they arrange their first 90 days, the work that needs to happen for the public health side and the social services side. None of that would change. Our staff has continued to do that prior to this consent being required.
Everything we do is staying the same except this one procedure of getting the consent signature. That's the only thing that's changing with the entire program.
Commissioner Rape.
Just for some clarification for all of us, as I understood it when we discussed it in the agenda, this is just becoming an executive order. It was being done, but now they have to have county permission. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
And so,
I'm sorry.
so help me understand. The individual comes over and they are legally in the United States. And they're sent to your organization for the reason of they have family here, or they choose to come to Charlotte, or?
The majority of our cases are U.S. tie cases, which means they have family here. There are some what they're called free cases, where they can choose where they want to go.
Okay,
They get assigned.
okay,
Those 9 nationals, they sit around a table, literally, and they divvy up the
Okay.
cases that don't have a U.S. tie.
I'm with you so far. So they come to you,
Mhm.
and you go into this 90-day process, correct?
Mhm.
But if you don't have consent, you have to, they can't come here, so you have to send them elsewhere, is that correct?
Right now, we have consent in Mecklenburg.
Right,
So
but
we
I'm
can
saying,
still
if you don't
operate in
have consent in
Mecklenburg. We don't
Union-
have consent in Union. The families that are coming here to reunite with their family, they can either come
What?
here and not get our services, or they can live in Mecklenburg for a couple of months while we provide those services, and then they can move here to be with their family.
Okay,
They are
but those
free to
people
go
that
wherever
don't
they
have-
want.
Those people that don't have family but just choose to come here, you said they could do that, right? They don't
Yes.
have to have family,
Yes.
they can just choose.
Mhm.
And so you say that sorry, Union County doesn't give consent. So are they then out of that 90-day vetting or work that you do, and they're off to go anywhere in the country they want to go?
I guess I'm not completely understanding. If they're being sent to Catholic Charities in Charlotte or to CRA in Charlotte, if they have family in Union County, that's where we will set up their apartment for them to live. If they don't have family in Union County, we're gonna set them up in Mecklenburg County because
Right.
that's where we operate.
I understand.
Once they're in Mecklenburg County, if they say, hey, that place down south, Union County, is really nice, I wanna move there, they can do it. We wouldn't really have anything to do with that. Once we close the case at 90 days, they don't really have a reason to stay because we're done providing services to them, and they can go wherever they want. They can come to Mecklenburg, and 2 weeks later, they can move down here if they want to. They just, it's the services that they'll be missing out on, but their families are here. Their families help support them.
So the consent by Union County is independent of the work that you do, the services that you're offering?
Well, what it would mean is if we have families that are coming that have family ties in Union County, we're not going to be able to place them with their families.
Yeah.
We'll have to place them in Mecklenburg somewhere, and they'll be separated from their families.
And do you absolutely positively have to have an answer tonight?
No, technically, no.
Okay. Can we table this and visit with our legal counsel and come back next meeting maybe and take action?
Sure.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'll be glad to withdraw the motion if you'd like to discuss it and go at it at another time. But I will say this, it's particularly disturbing to me that somebody can say they're only here a week and tell me they're from Syria. That's why they're having trouble with the language on the test. And you don't know of any Syrians that have moved here.
I don't.
They're in apartments like you're describing. They're telling me why they're here, and
Were they resettled refugees? Did they say that?
they just said, yeah, that's what they're, but, I mean,
Okay,
they're
Mr.
refugees from Syria.
There's no
Yes.
Syrian refugees were in an initial placement
All right.
in Union County.
No, we've only
Mr.
placed Ukrainian
Commissioner-
families here.
Thank you. Commissioner Rushing has withdrawn his motion,
Withdraw the motion.
and we have a motion to table pending legal advice and review and come back next meeting. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much for your time. All good?
Yes, sir.
Okay. County manager's comments.
I have no comments tonight, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. Ray.
I'm kinda like Bubba, I wanna go home.
Okay. Commissioner Hale.
No comments.
Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wanted to point out some information that was earlier on in an issue. We talked about kicking the can down the road, how we've been kicking the can. The can's not been kicked down the road by this board, nor has the funding been kicked down the road by this board or any previous boards. In 2019, we were told that the Yadkin project had gone up in price by almost $100 million. It went from approximately $200 million to approximately $300 million. It's not about kicking the can, it's about sticker shock. We weren't told, those many years ago when we were making these increases, so how could we have known? Because none of us knew the price tag was going up on this board. Few of us asked questions about it. Why did it go up? What are we doing? Chesterfield and Anson County have pipes of water to the Union County line in several locations. They have water countywide. They're low-wealth counties. We asked and was told by Tommy Tucker and Dean Art to ask. Said, there's money available for you to get water throughout the county. Go to Alligator Water. Talk to Alligator Water. Ask them if they can provide water, and there's monies available through the bonds to help Union County. our staff didn't vet those options. We were told in that meeting in November, the two-day workshop, that if we had found another source of water, that we would lose interbasin transfer, which would make the Yadkin project less feasible than it already is. You have voted for $900 million. You voted for more than $900 million. I predict it'll be well over $1 billion. The first time I heard the $900 million figure was not from our staff. It was from Alligator Water. The engineers they were talking to told them, hey, $600 million is not what it's going to be. It's going to be well over that. It'll be $900 million. That's the first time I heard it, and that was beginning of last year. We have developers that sued Union County over impact fees, and they won. The potential exposure was $50 million. What's to say they're not going to sue again and win? And all these impact fees that we raised on them too, or just system development fees, are also in potential to be taken back, which will cause the cost to go up even more. You've already heard, this doesn't include the sewer plant that the manager says is going to be necessary to treat the water eventually. The staff presented a $122 million sewer plant on Crooked Creek, and it's not even in the 33%. We're talking about the water project is going to go drive at 33%. So the fake news that Commissioner Akins was talking about, those sound bites sound really good, but it's not conservative to raise water rates 33%. It's not conservative to raise taxes. It's not conservative to put a burden on the school system of $300,000 more a year unless we're going to fund it out of taxes. We don't fund it out of the enterprise fund. It's not fair, and God bless them, Wingate may not have to pay it. I don't know. I've asked Brian Matthews to get that information to us, and hopefully he'll come up with something soon, but Wingate may not even have to pay the 33%, and they're the only other entity on the interbasin transfer. So I don't appreciate the fake news comments. You know, I think that you've ignored a lot of information that we've been given. And I don't really appreciate the way this was handled, Mr. Manager, and tonight. I think that it could have been handled a lot better. But I've been asking hard questions, so I don't mind getting hard questions. Thank God I've got a good memory. So with that, thank everybody for coming tonight, and have a safe trip home.
Commissioner Akins.
I'm reminded of Ronald Reagan in the debate when he simply said, "There you go again. More fake news. You approved a $900 million bond? No, we didn't. Fake news. We didn't kick the can down the road. Had we approved the rate increases that were given to us at the time that they were given to us, at the level that we were given to us, we wouldn't be faced with a 15.5% increase for the next 2 years. So again, fake news. You might not like it, and maybe you don't like the way this was handled tonight, but I can tell you this, the rest of the colleagues on this board don't like the way you've handled spreading lies and misinformation. So your memory might be good in your opinion, but the information that you're sharing is not factual. With that, I wish everyone a good evening.
Motion to adjourn. I'm sorry.
Bubba, you are ready to go, ain't you?
Getting hot.
The only comment I would make is to keep in mind that the Board of County Commissioners operates as a board, not as individuals. We take action as a board, and that's the only action that counts. So with that, I'll thank you, Mr. Manager, for bringing that information to us. It was succinct, and I personally received it well. So again, ladies, thank you for coming. We'll try to get that information to you as soon as possible. And now, Mr. Rape, I'll entertain your motion.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.